I never imagined that the life I had painstakingly built would shatter in a single afternoon. It started like any ordinary day, the sunlight streaming through the blinds, the soft hum of the city outside, and the lingering smell of fresh coffee from the kitchen. I thought I was living a fairy tale marriage, a modest but happy life with Armin, my husband of 7 years. He was charming, persuasive, and everyone who met him assumed he was a caring man. I thought I knew him. How wrong I was. The first hint that something was wrong came in a seemingly innocent way. Armin had been unusually distant for weeks, and when I confronted him, he laughed it off, claiming work stress and the pressures of daily life. My sister, Aisha, had recently moved in with us temporarily after a minor disagreement with her parents. I had welcomed her warmly, as always, seeing it as an opportunity to help her get back on her feet. I never suspected that this act of kindness would become the very reason my life unraveled. One evening, I returned home earlier than expected. The apartment was eerily silent, and a strange tension hung in the air. I called out to Armin and Aisha, but there was no reply. As I walked into the bedroom, I saw Armin's phone on the dresser, buzzing incessantly. Curiosity overcame my hesitation. When I unlocked it, the screen lit up with a message that made my blood run cold. I can't believe she's pregnant, thanks for everything. Don't worry, I'll handle it. We'll need their support. My hands trembled as I read it again and again, unable to grasp the truth. The truth hit me like a hammer. Armin had been sleeping with my sister, and now she was carrying his child. I felt a wave of nausea, betrayal, and rage surge through me. Everything I had trusted, everything I had believed in, was a lie. My husband, the man I had loved, supported, and sacrificed for, had taken our life savings and left, claiming that Aisha needed our support. The audacity, the sheer selfishness of it all, left me speechless. I confronted them that night. The conversation was brief, explosive, and left no room for denial. Armin smirked, as if proud of his manipulation, and Aisha avoided my gaze, guilt and fear mingling in her expression. They didn't beg, they didn't cry. They merely explained their version of events as though I was supposed to sympathize. But instead of tears, I felt a cold, calculating anger settle in my chest. I realized that crying would change nothing. What I needed was action. The following days were a blur. I withdrew from friends, avoided work, and immersed myself in planning. I wasn't going to let them ruin my life. Every detail of their deceit, every lie, every betrayal, was meticulously catalogued in my mind. I thought about the impact on my career, my reputation, and most importantly, the justice they deserved. Armin had underestimated me. He had mistaken my kindness and love for weakness. The first step in my plan was information. I needed to understand every aspect of their lives, where they worked, who they interacted with, and their financial dealings. I hired a private investigator to track their movements and gather evidence. Every meeting they had, every call they made, every transaction, was documented. As I watched their carefully constructed world unfold, I realized how blind I had been. Armin had thought he was the predator, but he didn't know that the hunt had just begun, and I was the one holding the net. Simultaneously, I began securing my own position. I closed all accounts they had access to, changed passwords, and ensured that nothing could be seized without my knowledge. It was a small victory, but it gave me momentum. I started reconnecting with friends I had distanced myself from, planting subtle seeds of the truth, while keeping my plans hidden. I needed allies, and I was learning that some people only respect power, not pleas for understanding. One night, as I sifted through the information my investigator had provided, I discovered something chilling. Armin had been siphoning off small amounts from our joint accounts for months, under the guise of investments and expenses. The total amounted to a figure that made my stomach twist, not just money, but the betrayal it represented. He had built a comfortable life for himself and Aisha while leaving me to pick up the pieces. My fury grew, but so did my clarity. This was not a moment for impulsive revenge, this was a moment for precision. I began crafting a strategy. I would not confront them directly. That would be too obvious, too easy for them to dismiss or manipulate. Instead, I planned to dismantle their lives in a way that left no room for escape, no opportunity for manipulation, and no doubt in anyone's mind about their true nature. I needed leverage, exposure, and a methodical approach that would leave them vulnerable at every turn. Step 1 was the financial angle. I traced every transaction, every withdrawal, every investment Armin had made with our savings. I consulted with legal experts and financial analysts to understand how I could reclaim what was mine and expose his misdeeds without incriminating myself. It was complex, painstaking work, but it became a source of empowerment. With every document I obtained, with every legal loophole I discovered, I felt the tide beginning to turn. Step 2 was psychological. Armin and Aisha thrived on control, on the illusion that they could manipulate everyone around them. I began leaving subtle hints, carefully calculated messages, and anonymous tips that started sowing seeds of doubt among their acquaintances, colleagues, and social circle. People began questioning their integrity, and whispers started circulating. The once confident smiles of my betrayers began to falter. It was subtle, but it was effective. Meanwhile, I remained outwardly composed, even cheerful, maintaining my public image while secretly orchestrating their downfall. I learned to channel my anger into focus, transforming rage into strategy. Each decision I made was calculated to maximize impact while minimizing risk. I wasn't seeking mere vengeance, I was seeking justice, exposure, and retribution that would leave them without any refuge. Late one night, as I reviewed my progress, a strange satisfaction washed over me. I had turned my pain into power. I realized that betrayal, while devastating, had unlocked a side of me I hadn't known existed, a strategic, fearless, and unyielding side. I was no longer the woman who had trusted blindly. I was someone who would reclaim everything that was taken from her, and more. The first moves had been made, and the pieces were beginning to fall into place. Armin and Aisha believed they had escaped scrutiny, but their arrogance was their weakness. I was about to remind them that betrayal comes at a price, and that the one they had underestimated was capable of orchestrating consequences far beyond their imagination. By the end of the first week, I had everything set in motion: legal maneuvers to freeze their access to funds, social tactics to isolate them, and a network of allies ready to amplify the truth. I knew that the path ahead would be long, dangerous, and emotionally taxing, but I was prepared. For the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares, because I was no longer a victim, I was the architect of their reckoning. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city skyline, and allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about rage, it was about control. And finally, I had it. The weeks that followed were a test of patience, restraint, and mental endurance. I knew that revenge wasn't a sprint, it was a slow-burning fire that required careful control so it wouldn't destroy the wrong things. As I quietly built my case, Armin and Aisha continued believing they were living some twisted version of freedom. They didn't know their new life sat on a foundation of cracking ice. One evening, while reviewing the latest report from my private investigator, I learned that Armin had rented a small apartment with the remainder of my stolen savings. My stomach tightened when I saw pictures of Aisha sitting on the couch, looking exhausted and holding her growing belly. The sight didn't make me feel sympathy, it made me feel colder. She had made her choice. She had destroyed her sister's home. The consequences weren't mine to soften. But information alone wasn't enough. I needed influence. So I reached out to people who respected me, old friends, colleagues, and even a few community members who had always admired my integrity. I didn't tell them everything. I only gave pieces, subtle and carefully worded, nudging them to see the true colors of my husband and my sister. It didn't take long for whispers to become conversation, and conversation to become judgment. People talk, and once they do, reputations erode with astonishing speed. Meanwhile, I quietly began setting legal traps. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Layla, listened intently as I explained what I wanted: recovery of assets, proof of financial misconduct, and a way to ensure Armin couldn't manipulate his way out of consequences. She was impressed by how much groundwork I had already laid. Most people come to me broken, she said. You've come prepared for battle. Her confidence fueled me. We began collecting bank statements, tracing illegal withdrawals, and documenting the timeline of his affair. Every detail mattered, every date, every transaction. Armin had made mistakes. He had left trails, small but obvious to anyone paying attention. Those trails were becoming ropes I would eventually tighten around him. But what truly accelerated my plan was an unexpected encounter. I ran into one of Armin's coworkers at a local cafe. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, almost guilty. That expression told me there was more to the story than even I had uncovered. I offered him a polite smile and asked how work was going. He hesitated before sighing deeply. I'm sorry about everything, he murmured. We all tried to warn him. He's been reckless over there. Over there. I leaned forward subtly. He explained that Armin had been engaging in questionable financial behavior at his job, too: small manipulations, misreporting hours, and even mishandling funds. Nothing big enough to spark an official investigation yet, but enough that people noticed. Enough that I realized I had a whole new angle. That night, sitting in the dim glow of my living room lamp, I pieced together the puzzle. Armin's greed wasn't confined to our marriage, it was part of who he was. And if I played this right, I could ensure that he lost not just money, but credibility, employment, and security. I drafted a detailed, anonymous report and sent it to his company's compliance department. Not lies, only the truth, supported by evidence from his own coworkers. I attached copies of transactions he had mismatched, reports he altered, and even screenshots of messages where he bragged about knowing how to work the system. I knew they would investigate quietly. Companies always did. And once they did, Armin wouldn't see it coming. While that plan unfolded in the background, I began preparing for a more personal confrontation, but not with Armin. With my sister. Aisha had always been the fragile one. Growing up, the one I protected, the one I supported without thinking twice. But when I stood outside her apartment one cold afternoon, I felt none of that old loyalty. I felt only a hollow ache that reminded me of all we had lost: trust, sisterhood, innocence. She opened the door slowly when I knocked, her face pale, eyes swollen. For a moment, she looked relieved to see me. Then fear replaced the relief. She knew. "Why are you here?" she whispered. I stepped inside without answering. The apartment smelled of cheap food, stale air, and tension. Armin wasn't home. Good. Aisha stood nervously near the couch, hands protectively over her stomach. "Please," she murmured, "don't yell. I can't handle stress." "I'm not here to yell," I replied calmly. "I'm here to understand something." Her shoulders sagged. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why him? Why like this?" Tears filled her eyes instantly. "I didn't plan it," she whispered. "He made me feel seen. He told me things I wanted to believe. I was stupid, I know, but he promised me he would leave you gently, that he would tell you." "He didn't," I said coldly. "And you didn't stop him." She sobbed softly, sinking onto the couch. "I thought he loved me. I thought he would take care of me." "He won't," I said. "Not now, not ever." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. Not directly, but I let my silence settle in the room like a storm cloud. In that moment, Aisha realized something: whatever fragile fantasy she had built with Armin was about to collapse. "I'm not going to hurt you," I finally said. "But you both will face consequences. Choices have prices." She trembled. "Please, don't destroy my life." "That was your job," I replied, "when you destroyed mine." I left her in tears, but I felt no satisfaction. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was weighty, heavy, like carrying stones inside your chest. But it was necessary. A few days later, the first blow landed. Armin was suspended from work pending investigation. When he stormed into Aisha's apartment, furious and panicked, the investigator captured everything: his shouting, his blame, the way he called her a burden and accused her of ruining his life. It was all recorded. Evidence. Proof. Then, the next strike. My lawyer filed a formal case against him: theft, financial misconduct, and marital fraud. The documents arrived at his door like a thunderclap. Everything he had stolen was traceable. Everything he had done was now in legal records. But the biggest blow wasn't from me. It was from his company. Armin was fired for financial violations. His final severance was withheld pending full review. His professional record was permanently stained. He wouldn't find another job easily, not with his history. The night after his firing, my investigator sent me footage: Armin sitting alone on the apartment floor, head in his hands, shouting at Aisha, blaming her for everything. She cried, her hands trembling as she defended herself weakly. I watched it quietly. It wasn't joy I felt. It was justice. Slow, steady, deserved justice. But this was only the beginning. I still had one final move left, the move that would shatter the last illusion Armin clung to, the one thing he thought he could control. I was going to take back everything, and leave him with nothing. The final phase of my plan was the most delicate. I had struck Armin's finances, his job, and his fragile ego. But there was still one thing he held onto, the one illusion he clung to even as his life crumbled: he believed he still had control over me. He thought I was the same woman who once trusted him, loved him, and forgave his smallest missteps without hesitation. He thought I was wounded, not dangerous. And that miscalculation was exactly what I needed. I knew the court case wouldn't be enough. Legal justice takes time, and people like Armin always try to twist things, blame others, or manipulate sympathy. So I prepared a final move, one that would expose him publicly, professionally, and socially, leaving him with no reputation to hide behind. I spent 2 weeks gathering every scrap of recorded evidence, voice messages where he bragged about tricking me, screenshots of his financial theft, footage of him screaming at Aisha, copies of bank statements showing illegal transfers, and the detailed record of his misconduct at work. I organized it all into a dossier, neatly formatted, easy to understand, impossible to deny. Then, I prepared something more powerful, a written statement of my story, calm and factual, without any dramatic exaggeration. People don't trust emotional outbursts, they trust quiet truth. I recorded a video version too, my voice steady, my expression composed. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I didn't accuse. I simply told the truth. The betrayal, the theft, the abandonment, the manipulation, everything. When it was ready, I didn't release it immediately. I waited, and the moment came sooner than expected. One night, Armin showed up at my door. I had just finished dinner and was preparing documents for my lawyer when I heard the knock. It was loud, angry, impatient, the knock of someone who still believed he had rights over my time and my peace. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. Armin stood there, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled. Behind the mask of confidence he once wore so smoothly, I saw the cracks. Deep, ugly cracks that revealed the man he truly was. You ruined my life, he spat immediately. I didn't react. No, I replied calmly. You ruined your own life. I just stopped hiding it. He pushed past me into the living room without permission, pacing like a restless animal. My job is gone. Everyone is avoiding me. Aisha is crying all the time. And now people are talking. What did you do? I told the truth, I said simply. He turned to face me, fury twisting his features. You think you're smart. You think you've won. I still have rights. I still have claims. That money wasn't just yours. I invested it. I can sue you. I felt a cold amusement rise inside me. You can try, I replied. But everything is documented. Every illegal transaction. Every misuse. Every lie. I built a case before you even knew there was one. For the first time in our entire marriage, I saw something break behind his eyes, not anger, but fear. Real, undeniable fear. You're not the person I married, he whispered. No, I agreed. I'm not. That woman died the day you betrayed her. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Then he laughed, forced, bitter. You think this ends with your little games. You think you can win. Life isn't like that. People forget. You'll move on. Aisha will give birth. I'll rebuild. You'll regret making an enemy of me. I stepped closer, my voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through his delusion. I don't want to be your enemy, I said. I want you to be irrelevant. Something in him snapped. He raised his voice, stepping toward me, but before he could finish his sentence, my phone buzzed. I lifted it slowly, making sure he could see the screen. One tap, and the video I had prepared began playing, the compilation of evidence, his messages, his confessions, his financial crimes, everything. His face drained of color. What is that? He whispered. Proof, I replied. And tonight, it goes public. His eyes widened. You wouldn't. I would, I said softly. And I will. I walked to the door and opened it. Leave. The next time anyone hears your name, it won't be as my husband. It will be as the man who destroyed his family and thought he could walk away. For a moment, he stood frozen, torn between rage and panic. Then, slowly, he walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't yell again. He just left, defeated in a way even he couldn't deny. As soon as the door clicked shut, I uploaded everything. Within minutes, my story spread like wildfire. People who once admired Armin were shocked. His former coworkers validated my claims. Friends who had doubted me now apologized. Women reached out to share their own experiences with manipulative men. My inbox overflowed with messages of support. Some called me brave, others called me strong, but I didn't feel brave or strong. I just felt free. In the days that followed, Armin's world collapsed. His reputation was gone. No company wanted to hire him. Old friends cut him off. Aisha moved out of his apartment after another explosive fight and returned to our parents, not because she wanted comfort, but because she had nowhere else to go. She was alone, scared, and deeply regretful. I didn't forgive her, but I didn't hurt her further either. Her punishment was already built into her choices. Armin, however, wasn't finished suffering. The legal case moved forward, and the court ordered him to repay every stolen rupee with penalties. Debt collectors began calling. His landlord issued an eviction notice. He tried reaching out to me multiple times, messages filled with excuses, promises, and sometimes threats. I didn't reply. Revenge wasn't about talking. It was about ending. The final blow came when his own family, embarrassed and furious, disowned him publicly. They blamed him for the humiliation, the scandal, the disgrace. For the first time in his life, Armin stood alone. Months passed. Slowly, I rebuilt myself. I moved to a new home, started a new job, reconnected with friends, and began living a life untouched by his shadow. I found laughter again, found peace again, found myself again. One day, while walking through a quiet park, I saw a man sitting on a bench with his head bowed, clothes worn, shoes dirty. It took me a moment to recognize him. Armin. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and pretended not to. He looked empty, defeated, a shell of the man who once believed he could destroy me and walk away unscathed. For a moment, I stood there, watching him. Not with hatred, not with anger, with closure. Revenge hadn't healed me, but justice had freed me. I turned away, the sunlight warm on my face, and kept walking, leaving Armin behind forever, not as a villain to fight, but as a lesson I had already learned. And this time, I didn't look back.